Ramadan.
Well, we continue with the Iftar Drive, and we're going across now to the United States of America. We're going to be chatting with Miko Peled, author, writer, speaker, human rights activist. And yes, he's got some very, very interesting podcasts. And also at the same time, following him on Twitter, there's just so much that Miko brings through with regards to the Palestinian Israeli question. And of concern of late has been the brutality that has unfolded at the Al Aqsa Mosque. And subsequently, we've seen the bombing of Gaza as well. So without much ado, we're going across to the United States of America. We're now joined by Miko Peled. Miko, good afternoon to you. I know it's morning in the United States of America. Welcome to the show and wonderful having you with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, I know you've been following developments, and you have made the statement that violence is escalating against the Palestinians at an alarming and at a dangerous rate at this point in time. And considering that this is the month of Ramadan, it is the holiest month, and also with the Jewish Passover that has taken place. So basically, both ways, these are days that mean a lot to both Jews and to the Palestinians. But looking at the violence, and we all knew that something was bound to happen, something had to give in Aqsa, and we knew that the Palestinians will not be having a peaceful Ramadan. Just your thoughts and on how dangerous a situation this has turned out to be at this point in time.
Yes, well, it's not all. It's Ramadan and it's Passover and it's Easter all at the same time. And normally, if you think about historically, before the Zionist takeover of Palestine, that would have been a very harmonious time. Everybody's celebrating their holidays and their holy days. But as Zionism has infiltrated into Palestine and has taken over Palestine, everything is now confrontational. And this new, culture that was established in Palestine, the Zionist culture, the Israeli culture, if you will, is violent and intolerant. And so, and we see the manifestation of that now. I mean, 75 years later, after the establishment of the State of Israel, or the apartheid State of Israel, I should say, we have, for at least the last decade, they are on a campaign to destroy Ramadan. I mean, Ramadan is a happy time. I remember, walking around the old city in Jerusalem during Ramadan in the evening, Ramadan evenings, and it's just so delightful. And over the years, they have made it a time of mourning and sadness to the point where people cannot enjoy these times anymore. There's always fear. There's always a danger of loved ones being killed. And with this now particular government in place, it's far worse than it ever was, because they are not only talking about taking over Al-Aqsa, they're not only talking about taking away the privileges of Palestinian Muslims from Al-Aqsa, they're actually doing it. We see this every single day. We see this every single Jewish holiday. They come in masses. I actually participated in a couple of these tours that the settlers give, marching through Al-Aqsa compound, and it's frightening. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis go now every year, and particularly now. So this is what is happening. I mean, there is an actual takeover of Al-Aqsa by these racist settlers and violent, very, very violent people, and there is an attempt to take it away from Palestinians, either by instilling fear so that people are afraid to go because it's so dangerous, or by limiting their access to Jerusalem and limiting their access into the old city of Jerusalem, which is where Al-Aqsa, of course, sits. So this is a very, very dangerous time, and I think Palestine is now on the brink of a catastrophe, on the edge of a precipice, if you will.
Well, certainly, and also, Miko, just looking at the people in charge, people like Benjamin Netanyahu, and this is now somewhat of a loose cannon, unchecked, doing whatever he wants to. At the same time, in one of your tweets, you make mention of him being unchecked in terms of spreading lies as well. And the rest of the world buying into what Netanyahu is saying, but also at the same time surrounded by people who are termed as, hate mongers, lunatics in every sense of the word.
Yes. Yes. So Netanyahu is very clever, as we know. He's a very clever politician, and he's a very clever PR person. But he's very good in public relations. And so the outward, expression of his work and his life and Zionism, he presents as some kind of a miracle. The state of Israel is this miracle, and they made the desert blue, which of course is a complete lie. And then he invented an entire history of Palestine, which he wrote about and and he mentions every time he's being interviewed. And here in the United States, I'm telling you, they treat him like he was, a holy figure, like his words are the words of God or something. Nobody challenges him. He spews these terrible lies about the history of Palestine, about the current reality in Palestine, and nobody challenges him. Not the talk show hosts, not the not the media, nobody. And on the ground, what they have is, of course, he put in charge, like you said, hate mongers, lunatics, pyromaniacs who want to see nothing but the country burn. And you saw yesterday, thousands of these violent armed settlers were marching through the West Bank into another stolen piece of Palestinian land, which where they started an outpost. We saw what was happening in Jerusalem, the thousands of these settlers in Al-Aqsa, the beatings of worshippers in Al-Aqsa. And this is going on throughout the entire country. In other words, these are the things that come up into the headlines. But on the ground, in terms of expulsions and home demolitions and arrests and the killings, the rate of killings of Palestinians this year is higher than it's ever been before. And this is only talking about the Palestinians of the West Bank. We're not even including the Palestinians in Gaza. We're not including the Palestinians in the part of Palestine that was occupied in 1948. The 1948 Palestinians. So only counting the Palestinians in the West Bank, the numbers are staggering. And this is not going to stop. This is only going to get worse. And as I'm sure you know, there's a new militia that is being created now, which will be under the command of this new Minister of National Security, Tamar Ben-Gvir, who is a settler, a racist, a hate monger, and a dangerous, dangerous person, period. And he will now have his own private militia, well-funded, well-armed by the state. And these are these same settlers. These are these same settler gangs that have been raiding and terrorizing Palestinians throughout all of Palestine, not only the West Bank and East Jerusalem, but throughout all of Palestine, all of 1948 Palestine as well.
Yes. Now, just looking at some of the calls that you have been making, and you saying that we cannot pretend that nothing is happening, and the call is for people to sit up and take notice, for governments, for politicians, for the world to actually sit up and take notice, and at the same time, it's not just taking notice, but to take action where necessary, Miko.
Yes, look, the Palestinians are doing everything they can. Palestinians are fighting as hard as they can. Some using armed resistance, most of them using unarmed resistance, all forms of resistance throughout all of Palestine, in the West Bank, in the north, in the south, in the Naqab, in the south of Palestine, in the Galilee, around Jerusalem. Palestinians are engaged in all forms of resistance. Like I said, most of it is unarmed resistance. They are doing everything they can under conditions that are, I would equate to inmates in a maximum security prison. And so their hands are tied. And God bless them. They do so much with so little, but they can't win this without the international community. They cannot win this without the international community. When I was in South Africa, it was quite a while ago, but when I was in South Africa about 10 years ago, I think, people told me, we feel that the world helped us when we fought against apartheid. Now it is our duty to help Palestinians fight their fight against apartheid. And that is precisely the kind of sentiment that needs to be, that we need to see everywhere. It needs to spread around the world. Unless we demand that our politicians, our public figures denounce Zionism, denounce Israel, stop talking about two-state solution, stop talking about all these ideas that legitimize Israel, like the two-state solution. Stop talking about peace talks. We need to engage in sanctions. We need to engage in a boycott. Right now, you may have heard that in Indonesia, there was supposed to be a soccer match, an international soccer match, and there's a big problem there because many of the people do not want the Israeli team to participate. And the Indonesians were penalized for this, and they took away the competition from Indonesia. So this is happening on all spheres: political spheres, cultural spheres, sporting spheres, and athletic spheres, and so on. But there has to be an absolute, unconditional, zero tolerance for Zionism, zero tolerance for Israel, just like, towards the end at least, there was towards South Africa. You couldn't host a South African team if you had a sporting match. You couldn't invite a South African team for an academic conference. You couldn't, because you yourself your organization will be penalized. That is what it needs to be. People need to understand that it is immoral. It is wrong. It is unacceptable to support Zionism, to support any form of racism, to support anti-Semitism equally, and to support the state of Israel. It has to be banned completely. And these are precisely the kinds of things that we can do, any person can do, in order to help the Palestinian struggle and finally bring justice and peace to Palestine and to Palestinians.
Yes, and it's interesting, Miko. Every time we look at Israel and we speak about apartheid, and there's always this comparison made with South Africa. And just yesterday, in one of the local newspapers, a columnist wrote an article doing this comparison. And in comparing, the statement that was made is the apartheid against the people of Palestine compared to South Africa. In fact, South Africa is like a walk in the park, actually. It was basically a picnic compared to what the Palestinians are actually going through.
Yes, that was said a long time ago. That has been said by many South African leaders over the years. And what Israel managed to do, it managed to learn from the experiences of apartheid South Africa and improve on that. So now they are much more effective, and they're using methods that are far more cruel, and so on. And again, Palestine is much smaller by a lot than South Africa, of course, and not as rich. And so they've perfected their tools, and so it is far worse than it ever was before. And it's interesting, when the comparison between the two apartheid regimes, when I was in South Africa, I was interviewed, I think it was South African television, the South African BC, I think. And there was another Israeli there that they brought into the studio, and the host asked both of us, asked me why it's apartheid and asked him why it's not. And you can find the clip on YouTube. It's very funny. He asked me, and I explained why it's clearly an apartheid. And mind you, this is before even Amnesty came out with a report. So, now there's a report, so it's a much easier argument. And then he looked at the other Israeli, and he said to him, so how is it not an apartheid regime? And he sat there with his mouth open for what seemed like an eternity. This is live TV. And of course, there's no answer, because it is an apartheid regime. And mind you, this is 10 or so years ago. Today, there's a report. There's an Amnesty report, which is not the only one, but it's the latest and probably the most comprehensive one. So anybody who needs a reason to ban Israel, to impose sanctions against Israel, the report is right there. Anybody who wants to know why it's an apartheid regime, or how it's an apartheid regime, how apartheid manifests itself in Palestine, and not from today, going back 75 years. The report is very, very thorough. All they have to do is look at the report. There's a report, and then there are the recommendations at the end of the report. And so it's actually a much easier task than it ever was. And still, we are finding that politicians around the world and governments around the world, even Muslim governments, even countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and Pakistan, are beginning to discuss the possibility of warming up relations and normalizing relations with the state of Israel. So this is our responsibility as people of conscience to stand with Palestine, just like it was people's responsibility back then to stand with the fight against apartheid in South Africa. This is a moral issue. It's not a political issue. It's not a religious issue. It's a moral issue.
Yes, and clearly a moral issue. And It's all about justice. It's all about seeking justice for people who are obviously going through a lot in well over 7 decades, and that is what matters, and it cannot go on forever. Because as always, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us here on Sada Media this afternoon. Unfortunately, time is of the essence. I know you and I can engage for a lot more. There's just so much to still unpack, but
Yes.
hopefully at some point in time, we will get that opportunity again. But for now, we wish you all the best, sir. Please take care and please be safe.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Miko Peled joining us out of the United States of America, Washington, D.C. We're going to go for a break. And when we come back, we've got Suleiman Patel standing by and the mayor of Johannesburg, Tapelo Ahmed, under somewhat of pressure with regard to claims of a 9.5 billion loan. And how much confidence do how much confidence have those who have put him in power got now that they are learning about this 9.5 billion loan and not knowing what it's all about? But we'll find out from Suleiman Patel when we come back after the break.